Hello, I'm Princess Anne, and whenever I want to buy a classic car, I go to carandclassic.com. They've got over 35,000 cars and motorbikes for sale at any given time, either by advert or online auction. Personally, I've just picked up an Aeroshape Astra GTE. It's well wicked. I'm on my 7th. So, go to carandclassic.com or I'll set the horses on you.
Smith & Sniff is sponsored by Car and Classic.
A Reliant what? Never heard of it.
I'm Richard Porter.
I'm Johnny Smith.
And this is Smith & Sniff, a podcast in which two friends talk about cars and many other things.
You know those statues on Easter Island with the very narrow heads?
Yes.
Well, I went on a holiday with the children to Amsterdam during Easter, and not to Easter Island. But the reason why I'm saying this is because they have some very specialist cars over there, urban city cars, which are very, very narrow. They're a one-person car. And they have diplomatic immunity from what I can tell, because you know the Dutch, they're very much, the cycling is the top of the food chain when it comes to vehicular transport. Well, these guys, these little car things that probably aren't classed as cars, they're allowed to go anywhere where a bicycle can. And up until I think not that long ago, they were allowed to park on pavements anywhere in Amsterdam. So people were just buying them because they could just do whatever they wanted to do in these one-seater, and they're called a biro or a biro, B-I-R-O, and I believe the older ones, because I couldn't take any photos because I was cycling most of the time, and if you've ever tried to take a photo while you're cycling, it's dangerous and stupid, and I didn't do it.
Yeah.
But I need to check, because I think they're called, the older ones are called the Biro Cantina LX, or it just sounds totally made up, like it's from Grand Theft Auto, like a pretend car. It does sound it's something. It says Cant, but I
Cant.
It's on the back of the car. It might be Canty. Is it the Canty LX? I'll look it up. I should have prepped before we started. Before we started recording, because I just kept giggling every time I was cycling around. I kept pointing to the kids, and they were sniggering. And one guy came herring past us, an older guy in one of these biro cars, and just was, should we say, if he'd had pace notes, it would have just said flat left, flat straight on. In fact, flat everywhere. And he was just getting over quite aggressive speed ramps, flat out. And the thing doesn't really seem to have much suspension, because, in a car, you don't see any compression. You just see a sort of judder and a leap. That's what this was. And he was all over the shop in this thing. And then just pretty much handbrake turned it outside the railway station and got out and abandoned it. It's like a really shit scene from Ronin.
Literally just...
It was amazing. And because they're so narrow, you just can't take them seriously, because you think they're going to blow over. Because we're obviously riding around next to lots of canals and the rivers, and there is a bit of a lick of wind regularly. You've got to be careful in a narrow-sided car, haven't you?
Yeah. I
can't remember the name of that. I'm really annoyed that I can't remember There's a biro or a biro, but there's the really...
Is no relation to biro as in the pen?
I don't know. I don't think so, because it's got an accent over the O.
Okay.
But I don't. But I'd love it if it was. If biro, the pen people, went, do you know what? No one buys biros anymore because everyone does shit on touchscreens. So let's just build a really narrow car instead.
But they won't come after us. They've got no money.
Exactly.
It's my theory that, in fact, they stopped production of biros about 30 or 40 years ago. There's just a finite number of biros in the world, and they get passed around, which is why you can never find one when you need one. But everybody's got a drawer with about 1,000 in them. It's just a fact of life that, the biro is a finite resource.
Oh, but it is though, isn't it?
We're both left-handers, aren't we? So I guess are you a biro enthusiast like I am?
Oh,
I can't
massive.
be dealing with fountain pens, but I love a good biro, a good biro with a tight delivery so that it doesn't splodge.
Oh, I used to really. I still do it. If I get a free... In fact, I've got a Porsche biro in my pocket right now, and I don't mind telling you. If I go on a launch or an event, or even a hotel, actually, next to the bed in the hotel, and you borrow a biro and it feels smooth and good, you take it. You go, this one's a keeper.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And
yeah.
It just, if it feels right, then it probably is. And you just go with it. It's lovely.
Yeah.
I've just looked this up. It's called. There's two types of these very narrow cars. There's one that's older and looks much funnier, and then there's another one that's more like a Citroen Ami. So the Citroen Ami looking thing is called a biro or a biro, but the one I was telling you about that looks like something from the Incredibles cartoon is called a Canter LX, CANT, like Brian, with an A on the end. So Canter. It is manufactured in the Netherlands by a small company called Wagenberg, or Waijenberg, and it's not electric. Certainly not the ones I've seen. Okay. No, I think they must be single cylinder.
Yeah.
Or twin.
They sound really similar to those little cars you get in France.
Yeah, I think they are
the Axiom, stuff like that.
Sans permis cars.
And you can drive them when you're a teenager. You can 15, I think, you can drive them. And
that's right.
I believe also, now this may not be enshrined in French law, but I believe that many French people believe that you can also drive them if you're pissed. I know this because I once saw an incredibly drunk old man trying to get into one in a rural French village and eventually puttered off. And I was thinking, on the one hand, it's like, he's so clearly shit-faced because he's just come out of the cafe over there.
Yeah.
But, so I feel like, I'm trying to go, should we tell someone about this or stop him? And then he saw him drive off and you go, okay, that thing can do a maximum of 10 kilometres an hour. So I feel like, I'm sure he does this every night and it's fine. And we just watched him drive off through the village square and off into the distance.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, they are like the sans permis. You don't need a driver's licence.
Right.
You can legally drive them on cycle paths and, according to the company, through shopping centres, although I have not seen this.
So they're a bit like a mobility scooter in that sense.
Yes, but they all have a Honda engine of either 160 or 200cc, which is actually not shit. And the Dutch versions reach speeds of up to 30 miles an hour, while a German electric model only goes half that speed. And the UK version, there isn't a UK version, is there? I'm reading this off. What evidently can go up to 70 kilometres an hour. That seems way fast. Yeah,
that seems way fast.
And it says here, the Canter has only been manufactured since 1998. Well, to look at it, you'd think it was definitely built at least 15 years before that. And it said they only make a few hundred a year. They're actually more expensive than you realise. They're €11,000.
What?
The basic model is the Canter LX. I was right. That only comes in red or white, and for an extra €1,000 on top of the €11,850, you can choose the exclusive, which features the, in inverted commas, monster 200cc engine. And it also comes in silver or green. This is amazing. Brilliant. So if you see a silver or a green one, you know that guy's balling. Honestly.
What I'm wondering, though, is when you said Honda engine, I was suddenly like, ooh, I wonder if anyone's like Fireblade swapped one or something.
Oh my gosh. They just seem like they're not cheap for what they are, but they're immune to almost everything. I mean, you could drive as the crow would fly through Amsterdam, and as long as you didn't hit water, you'd be absolutely fine. Yeah. But you would hit water because it's Amsterdam. So
it's a very watery place. Yes.
It is, and it was sweet place. I have to say, I had a wonderful time, and I was trying to encourage the kids to embrace the whole cycling life in cities, and it's perfect for that because you do cycle paths everywhere. Bikes get preferential treatment. You can lock them up wherever you want. It's just very, very two-wheel friendly. But of course, the Dutch bikes are a very specific shape, and you do look like you're riding a steel swan. I've noticed that. It's a very swan-necky frame with the bars very high. We don't have bikes like this in the UK. We just wouldn't entertain it.
No.
But they've gone, well, we live in a flat country and we want good back posture and we want to be relaxed. We're riding a bike not because we put Lycra on, we're pretending to be Chris Boardman. We're doing this because we just want to get to work and not park a car. And so it's very logical.
Did you wear a helmet when you rode these bikes?
Well, I insisted on putting lids on because when I used to live in London and I used to commute off of a bicycle, and that I had a lot of incidents, and it's like you can really hurt yourself at very low speed, mate. I didn't want to risk it.
I mean, because I remember the last time I was in the Netherlands that it was conspicuous how few people did wear cycling helmets, and I think it's partly because I suppose people see less of a need because cycling, first of all, cyclists are kept separate a lot of the places because there's a really good network of cycle paths. Yeah. And secondly, because cycling is so sort of culturally ingrained as a part of the national psyche, that there's less of this sort of stoked war between the motorists and the cyclists.
Yeah.
And people are more respectful. So, and because the roads are properly designed for cycling and cars and not the sort of half-arsed bit of contrast colour tarmac we do here, that cycling is sort of certainly seen as less dangerous over there, so people don't think they need to kind of helmet up so much.
No, I think I probably look like a tourist with the lid on. Yeah. But it's fine. That's a personal choice, isn't it? I guess it's like, choosing to wear a mask on public transport still these days. It's entirely up to you. But I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was ace. And also... there are free, and I'm sorry if I'm preaching to the converted here, people who already know exactly what goes on in Amsterdam. Because when I say to people I took my kids away for a holiday to Amsterdam, everyone just looks at me with a slightly tilted head and a raised eyebrow. It's like, no, I've got an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old. There was no whoring and weed, all right? Please.
Yes.
Spare me. Spare me. There's a lot more to Amsterdam than that. Specifically... free pedestrian and cycle ferries, which are brilliant. So they're ferries that go across the big parts of the rivers, and you just cycle straight onto them, and within about a minute they just up the back lifts up or the front lifts up, and then they just bugger off. And they're really quick and frequent, and I think they run into the middle of the night, and they're FOC.
They're FOC as well, that's good.
They are FOC, and I thought, well, good, this is for pedestrians and cyclists, just to encourage people to get around even further on bikes. Oh no, because we saw an old guy in a Canter LX who just blitzed it straight onto there. Everyone moved to the side. Yeah. So these things get free ferry treatment as well. Basically, what we're dealing with here is a car that opens all of the doors, yet it's one of the worst or most comical-looking machines you ever see. And in fact, if you had one in the UK and you left it anywhere near a town centre at night, it would be pushed over. It absolutely would be, like cow tipping.
Yeah. Cow tipping, I was about to say.
It's automotive cow tipping, isn't it?
Biro tipping, or whatever you would call it.
Yeah.
Canter tipping.
Well, I'll share some pictures of the Canter LX for our Patreons, but I mean, they are great. I'd love to drive one. In fact, you and I should probably drive around Amsterdam in one. I think it could be great.
I thought you said they're one seat.
Oh, actually, they're one seat. So we'll have to have an intercom, and we'll just follow one another.
Yeah.
We'll
have a pair of Canters. Well, actually, tell you what. We'll go colours of the Dutch flag. 3. We can get Tiff in the third one.
Oh my gosh, that'd be amazing. Would it
but
be?
But don't make him go at the back. Can you imagine how much rubbing they'll go on because he wants to get by? He'll end up just nerfing you into a canal.
Oh, Tiff would use you as the clutch bike point at a junction and just nudge you out. He will. He's that guy. Hi, Tiff. It was good to speak to him the other day and see him.
So you went to Amsterdam with your kids, but then you also went separately. You went to the Netherlands to go and drive that Integrale that's up on the Late Break Show now.
True. What I did is I was going on that job, and was invited over to, I don't know, about an hour and a half outside Amsterdam to this company called Maturo Cars, and they prep rally and build rally cars. And then they've gone into, in the last few years, really exclusively building and repairing and restoring Lancia Delta Integrales, and it's amazing. The whole outfit's just stunning. They really are obsessed with the car. And I took a shining to this thing, and we've been discussing it. And they said, "Well, come over and drive it. We'd love you to do a video on it." And it's like imagine Singer doing an Integrale. It's probably the quickest way to get your head around the level that we're talking. And they've reimagined the car, but not with a different engine. So it's not like, it is more powerful, but it's the same block and it's the same actual turbo outer casing. But they've gone to town on improving the transmission, really gone to town on things like the suspension. And it drives so well. And it's built beautifully, just beautifully.
And your observation in the video that the gear lever reminds you of a Lego piece, I realise exactly what you meant. It's the aerial, isn't it? There's a little aerial you can put on Lego stuff.
That's it. And it does look.
We have a lot of them.
Oh, do you? Well, you should.
Well, because my boy's really into Lego Star Wars, and they always come with little antenna, which are actually that piece, that little black aerial that can flick side to side. It looks exactly like that.
It really does.
It's all thin.
It's a wand, isn't it?
With a little bobble on top.
It's a funny-looking wand. And the Fiat Strada Abarth has the same or very similar lever, and it is just so devoid of any ergonomic attention. It's just a big wand, but it's pleasant. I don't know why. I just kind of like it.
Now, that's piqued my interest because I'm just going on to Car and Classic, and because I wondered if there are any Strada Abarths for sale at the moment, because that's a rare car.
That is a rare car.
People look after them, I suppose.
Well,
increasingly so, because they're increasingly valuable. But
they've done that thing where they were always quite a difficult car to live with and look after.
Oh, hello.
What, have you found one?
Oh, look at this. 1987 Fiat Strada Abarth 130 TC.
Oh, it's the one.
So it's an 87. It's in Manchester.
What?
It's a left hooker, I think. It's on UK plates, but he says the ad says I imported it myself from Italy in 2016. Dry stored since. Registered in the UK this year. Absolutely original example. Never been welded. Never will need welding if stored correctly. Bold claim.
Gosh.
61,000 kilometres from new. Zero corrosion, interior unmarked, wheels recently refurbed, on new Pirelli tyres, nice, starts on the button, beautiful engine, blah-de-blah.
Sweet
Intake
car.
sucking through twin Delotto carbs, looks and drives like no other hot hatch of the 90s. It's from the... Okay. True thinking man's driver's car and very rare, has to be seen to be appreciated. Then I love this when car sellers get a little bit aggressive. He signs off with "find another." Yes,
I love that. I've done that before.
With 3 exclamation marks. Ooh. If you find another one, I will fight you.
It's the driving. It's the driving man's thinking car. This is
yes.
Whatever that means.
Yeah, it's like a Golf GTI that's not for pricks.
Yeah.
So, guess how much this very, very tidy left-hand drive Strada.
I bet it's gorgeous because that's the Ritmo, isn't it? In foreign countries,
it's a Ritmo. I just saw it on the back. It is badged as a Ritmo because it's this Italian market car.
That's right, Italian market. Oh, I mean it's a very specialist market for that car in Britain because most people have forgotten about it. Sadly,
exactly.
I did actually.
I remind you again, Johnny. Find another.
Yeah, I'm going to.
I will break into your house and shit in your bed. Right, I'm just browsing.
So. Because I'm just thinking here, if that was a Peugeot 205 of that calibre, that would be a lot of money, or a Renault 5 Turbo, or a...
Well, yeah, but I mean, 5 Turbo's probably closer, because I think 205 GTIs are still a lot around. 5 Turbo's a bit more of a rarity, but this, I think, would probably be even more rare.
Can I say, I'm going to say, I can't imagine he'd let it go for less than 15?
Ooh, he's got it up for 20.
Has he? Salty.
Punchy.
That is salty.
It is.
Actually, don't say the word salt and mention our bath in the same...
Don't you dare. There's no corrosion on it. If you find corrosion, I will smash you with an adjustable spanner. I wouldn't mess with this guy.
Good enough.
Control. That's the only Strada / Ritmo on Car and Classic at the moment, so I'm just going to search 130 TC in case there's any others lurking. Oh, there is!
Oh.
Bloody hell. Oh. So if you don't search Strada... There's one here. Bloody hell.
What?
there's one in Italy here. This is an 83 on those lovely sort of 4-spoke wheels that look a bit like...
Oh, I know the ones.
In their sort of curvature. They look a bit like those 5-spoke Starfish wheels you get on Jag XJSs and things. They're a lovely wheel.
Yeah, they are a great wheel. They're an Abarth wheel, aren't they? Yeah.
So this, again, it looks absolutely tidy AF. It's in Italy. I can't read the description because it's in Italian, but that's okay. I'll just accept that one of these words is the Italian for tidy.
Or find another, you bastard.
Yes. Hang on, I'm looking for the exclamation marks, which will denote where the seller has got a bit punchy about, find another, you fucker. This one's up for €26,000.
What?
Yeah, and then there's another one that's POA. In fact, there's two that are POA that are also in Italy. So actually, these things they've caught.
They have caught. I did a car cave. I think it was last year on a chap with a lot of cars. But they were. He loved his Italian hot hatchery, and he had a Delta Integrale Evo. But he said, and although that was one of his prized cars, he had a really immaculate Abarth 130 TC that he's had a lot of years. He's restored it, and he said it's the best. It's the best hot hatch of that time. He said, "You've got to drive one." He said, because I said I've never driven one. He said, "Come back and drive it because I've driven loads." He had 5 turbos, 205s of both derivatives. He had all sorts of things, Cinquecento Sportings. He had a really great selection of motors, but he was convinced that the Strada Abarth was it. It was it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Do any listeners have one, or have one? Because the thing is, they did dissolve like Alka-Seltzers, sadly, which is why there's not many around.
I've just gone onto eBay, and there's one here. Actually, it's one of those mysterious adverts where I think they might just be selling the engine. Yeah, they're just selling the engine, because the car... There's a picture of the car. I bought it as a rolling shelf of panels and spares, and the engine came with it.
Poor thing.
750 quid for the engine. The car looks absolutely shagged. Wow. It's a parts car, so fair enough. Can I just say, on the note of small Italian hot hatchbacks, how much I'm absolutely in love with my Panda at the moment. Because
you can say that.
I've had bits done to it. So I had the wheel bearing fixed so it doesn't rumble when you drive, and that's immediately a plus. Because I hate that kind of thing where you know there's something wrong with the car, you can't fully enjoy it.
I'm like that with my Element at the moment.
Oh yeah,
anti-roll bar bush. It's clunky when you certain steering angles and certain suspension movements, and it makes me grit my teeth for a long journey.
Yeah. Well, actually, I've got a clunky with the Panda that does need to be looked at. I think it's the strut top bearing on one side. So that has just taken the edge off, but it only happens at low speed. But then, so I had the wheel bearing done, and I had some new tyres. From your mates at Black Circles, I got some new tyres put on it, and I decided to go OEM because I'm a bit of a stickler for that. So that was a bit punchy price-wise.
Did you? Did you? What is the OEM rubber for that vehicle?
The Goodyear Eagle F1s.
Is it?
So, yeah. Yeah, but they are great, and it's got loads of grip, but you can totally trust the grip now because before the tyres were just a bit old. Yeah. They were, they Falcons on it, and they were just a bit old. They weren't totally worn out, but they were just kind of, they got a bit... kind of manky.
Goodyear Eagle F1s. So, I think the Ford GT came on those.
I think they're probably considered a bit out of date. The ones that there's kind of there are
stickier tyres.
Yeah, and you look at them. They look quite retro in a way because they're directional. They're very sort of the tread pattern is very
90s.
90s.
Is it 90s tread pattern?
I think that's so. Great. Yeah, I walk up to the car and from the back you go, my God, those are very retro tyres, which is odd. But yeah, I don't think modern high performance tyres don't look like that. Anyway, but I had those on, so it grips now, and I had to do a couple of long journeys in it, and including up into the Cotswolds, where I pulled out this junction. I was like, I know this road, but I don't think I've been here before. It's only bloody out of Harry's garage test road.
Oh, really?
You know that always has the shots of him accelerating across the junction at the top of his road test videos, and then there's a bit where he does a sort of swoopy uppy downy thing.
Yeah,
it was there. I realised I was coming out of that junction, but the other way, and then I was on that road. So
is the junction sponsored? Like roundabouts in towns.
I had to pay 90 quid to drive through it because Harry's somehow done a deal with people who own the roads.
Oh, it's a toll. Toll road.
Yes, it's the Harry Metcalf Highway. Anyway, I just want to say, I'm absolutely. This is probably going to, be the prelude to it doing something horrific like catching fire or snapping its cam belt. But the Panda is going beautifully, and I bloody love it. And just little Italian cars, because it's like, I heard Matt Pryor on the Autocar podcast talking about his Hillman Imp, and I remembered when I drove a Hillman Imp for the first time, it was with the owner, and he bollocked me for changing up too early.
That's right, yes.
And I kept forgetting, and then I'd be sort of, on a main road, accelerating up through the gears, and he'd be like, don't, no, and almost like slapping my hand off the gear lever. Rev it, you've got to rev it. And the Panda's a bit like that. You get the good stuff if you just hold on to the revs and let it climb, because it revs to like 7,000. So it really starts to get its head of steam, relatively speaking, after 4. So you've got to wring its little neck.
Yeah.
And you get the sense that that's what it's built for. It wants you to do that. And it's when you get your eye in with it, it's such a joy. I'm so happy with it. And it's not very fast. I mean, it's, I was behind a VW, what are they called, those pickups? Amarok.
Amarok, yeah.
I was behind a VW Amarok.
I always think of a Thor. It's a Thor film, isn't it? I always thought.
Yes. Or something in one of those old Batman shows where Batman does something really weird to somebody with an anvil and it just flashes up Amarok. But I was behind one of those. Obviously, a local knows the road, and I was like, because I'd overtaken a couple of things, but you have to be able to kind of plan an overtake. And I was like, I might go past this guy. And I was like, no, I'm not going past this guy. There's no way I'm getting past this guy, even in a pickup truck, because he knows the road. He's on it. He'll just hang me out to dry. I haven't got enough power to do a decisive overtaking manoeuvre, but that's fine. We were sort of just zipping along. It was all good. And then I had to go on the motorway. And the weird thing is, I mean, it's not exactly, an S-Class. But no. I just wanted to get home. I got on the M4, and then it whooshed up to kind of motorway speeds. And now that it's been kind of sorted out a little bit more, it will just sit on the motorway. And I've put in an aux cable so I can listen to music off my phone. And so I was just listening to music. You can just about hear things. It's fine. It's not as horrifically noisy. And off it went. And I just got home and I just went, what a great little car.
I know, and I know they, exactly as you said, some cars need to be rinsed a little bit, and the Imp, which is still a car that I will own at some point, I really need. I
want you to own an Imp.
I want a warmed over Imp, because I follow a guy on Instagram called James Ibbotson who races a historic Imp, and you just look at some of his Instagram reels, and he's just drifting it for about 15 seconds. In the middle of a track event.
Really?
Yeah, like it just looks so much fun, and I've heard that a sorted Imp is just so good, and I know it's slightly controversial, but I'm not really a Mini guy. I appreciate Minis are great, but I would always have an Imp over a Mini, always. So I just want a hot Imp. Oh, hot Imp, sir.
I sort of feel that the Imp is one of those cars that over the last sort of 50, 60 years, people have sorted them out in ways that the manufacturer couldn't.
Oh, they've totally sorted them.
So an Imp now can be the best it's ever been.
Oh, hell yeah. People put
in a really meaningful way.
People put put a BMW motorcycle engine in them. Apparently they're pretty quick. Like a flat twin, a Boxer.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's something very good about that. And weirdly, I've got my Beetle out of hibernation in the last sort of 48 hours, and that engine is again low compression, and the gas flow on it for the induction and everything is intentionally bad, because it was built so that you could just drive it flat out everywhere.
Oh.
And it wouldn't stress things too much. So it's not a free-breathing engine, really, but as such, you have to rev it through the gears in order for it to proceed. And it goes against, sometimes you kind of want to nurse it, but you can't really nurse it.
No.
I love it. I do love it, Richard.
Past that inherent mechanical sympathy that we have, I think.
It's true.
You have to sort of push through it.
Yeah.
Push through it, and then you go, oh, actually, the car seems happy. And if the car's happy, I'm happy. So we're all good here. But yeah. Anyway, since we're sort of talking about cars.
Well, it's a shame, isn't it? This must end.
I know, I'm sorry. I apologise. We'll inevitably talk about how, someone found a poo in a sock in a minute. But I wanted to talk about this announcement that was made last Wednesday by Jaguar Land Rover, who are not Jaguar Land Rover anymore. They're JLR.
Oh, yes.
They want to try and... what
do they want to do, Richard?
Well, it's a good question, isn't it? And there's various bits of this announcement. I mean, it seemed like it didn't tell us an awful lot, but at the same time, there was a lot to pick the bones out of. And I suppose the thing that has been then caused a right old kerfuffle was this perception they were binning off Land Rover.
Well, that was never going to happen, was it?
Well, it's not going to happen. And I was a bit disappointed with some of our colleagues in the world of car journalism. They all got a bit papping their knickers without actually making a fucking phone call to someone at, for example, Land Rover, who could give them... I mean, it's fair, the comms didn't make it absolutely clear. It allowed people to infer things. But, that's why we have email and messages and phones, so you can check. That's part of what being a journalist is. So, as I understand it now, having actually talked to the PR... They're not binning off Land Rover. The Land Rover badge will still be on the cars and on the dealerships, but what they're kind of trying to do, which they've sort of done before, because they've talked about how Range Rover is a family and then Discovery and Defender are separate sort of entities, because if you say to somebody, what do you drive? Nobody says, oh, I've got a Land Rover Range Rover. You'd sound like a lunatic. And in fact, I took my boy and some of his friends trampolining the other week and in our Range Rover, and one of his mates went, is this a Land Rover? And I said, well, yeah, it's a Range Rover. And he was like, oh, so it's not a Land Rover? And I said, no, it's made by Land Rover, but it's a Range Rover. And he went, so it is a Land Rover? And I went, so the company's Land Rover. And we had this quite long conversation where I was like...
It's a valid point.
This is quite confusing, isn't it? It's a valid point. So you could see why Range Rover is, people just call them Range Rovers, or in the US, Rovers. So,
yeah.
And equally... It's funny because if I had a new Defender, if someone would go, what have you drive? You'd go, I've got a Defender. And you wouldn't have to explain yourself. But I always refer to my old school Defender as my old Land Rover. I don't know why. I think because the Defender, the old school Defender, looks like everybody's mental image of a Land Rover. So
that's right.
Sort of, for non-car people, you're just, not having to explain yourself. But yeah, they're not binning off the Land Rover brand at all. What they're doing is just trying to push the sort of subcategories a bit more, and the understanding that nobody says Land Rover, Range Rover. So they'll, I guess, in the adverts, the Land Rover badge will just be small in the corner, which is pretty much what it's been for ages anyway.
Mm.
And it's not complicated. It's just sort of in the same way that it's the way I was trying to explain to my son's mate. It's like, you say you've got a Switch. You don't say Nintendo Switch, but Nintendo's the company that makes it. But that's okay. Switch is sort of just what you call it. And I think he sort of understood that. But
it's a bit like the Henry vacuum cleaner. You've got a Henry. You don't say I've got a pneumatic Henry.
Yeah. I had to think for a minute.
Pneumatic International Henry.
I mean, so many companies would rub sand in their own eyes to have brand names that are powerful enough to... It's like being a pop star and only needing to use your first name, like Elvis or Kylie or...
Madonna.
Someone.
I was talking about Madonna to a friend the other night, just explaining how sad it is that no one's going to really know what she looks like as an old woman. Because she's unfortunately, she looks like one of those pretend realistic dolls that men have relationships with, who are very strange.
Yes, she does.
Yeah, I think we'll probably leave that there.
I think so.
The ones that have to be hooked out of a bed with an engine crane and then moved into the kitchen and then dressed. I watched a documentary about it once. It was extremely strange. Yeah.
Sometimes Madonna looks a little bit... Do you know the Terry Gilliam film, Brazil? It's a fabulous film. And,
I don't know.
These heavily facelifted old women in that. And there's a scene with a coffin that if you've seen the movie, you might remember. If you haven't, I won't describe it. It's revolting, but it's all about sort of excessive cosmetic surgery. That's not the point of the film, but it's just a little sub bit in it. Talking of sub bits, so this is the thing. I checked with Land Rover, and it's like they're trying to make a point that, you know, if someone wants a Defender, they would probably just go online and Google Defender and hope that it came up. Yeah. So they're trying to sort of play to that, but they're not binning Land Rover or pulling the badges off the dealership or anything like that. It's just like Land Rover is still the overarching umbrella that sits over 3 of the 4 sub-brands that they're trying to push. I mean, they are using some wanky language, which seems to come from the mouth of Jerry McGovern, because he's talking about a house of brands, which to me makes it sound like a department store, but, you know.
House of Fraser, yeah. Well, so
anyway, so
the big news.
The PR guy just pointed out, he went, why would we bin off Land Rover when we have spent so many years fighting tooth and nail to protect it? And he pointed out that they're the only automotive company to take a Chinese car company to court and win, which they did with Landwind.
Oh, really?
Over the Evoque. So he's like, you know, we don't muck around. We are trying to protect our stuff, and that includes Land Rover. So, yeah, they're not giving it up. He referred to it as too iconic.
Well, it is true.
Yeah,
it means...
I think everybody just needs to stop getting their panties in a twist about this, because it's not happening.
I think the good news is that they're not getting rid of Jaguar, which was always a concern.
This is the other thing, because it was like, I had this feeling once old Terry Bollaro disappeared from the top job at JLR, it seemed like the Jag plan was his baby, and I thought, this might be the excuse. Did we mention this, I think, on the podcast before? It might be the excuse to just go, this is all very expensive and we can make enough money just focusing on Range Rovers and Defenders and things. Let's quietly shuffle Jag off into a retirement home.
Yeah.
But no. And I'd heard on the grapevine that there were these new Jags coming and they were all crossovers or SUVs. But no, the first one is going to be a 4-door GT, and that really is a much more interesting prospect.
It is, isn't it? And still built in off of England and all that.
Built out of off of England.
And all
in
that, yeah.
Solihull.
Solihull, yeah.
Solihull, which is... I do worry about the Castle Bromwich factory. They've said explicitly it's not closing. They're going to do more metal stamping there, so it'll become a kind of body in white or a panel stamping plant. But it's a bigger factory than that. It used to assemble cars. I mean, it still does at the moment because they make the F-types there and XFs and XEs. But so I don't know. I think I could imagine they might sell off some chunks of that because it's probably prime housing land. But the whole factory isn't closing down for now. But the electric Jag will be made in Solihull instead. I don't know. I mean,
it does seem odd, doesn't it, when they binned off the electric XJ, the new one that we'll never see.
Which was going to be made in Castle Brom, and they had invested a load of money in that factory to build it. So, it's a bit of...
That is a bit odd. Is that a U-turn decision slightly with... Who knows? We'll find out. Know.
And then the gossip from, I think it was Autocar last week, was that the Velar will be twinned with the Evoque and the Discovery Sport in future. They'll all be EVs. Sport.
Do you know, I found myself...
They'll be made up at Halewood.
I found myself driving the other day... Well, you were there because we were there at Goodwood, driving electro Bentleys, and I kept pressing the S button on the top of the gear shifter of that Arnage, which puts it into sport mode, and it bings up because the screen is very late 90s, it looks like a Game Boy which just said sport, and I just kept pressing it and saying to myself, because I was hungover on my own in a car, sport. I always sort of had rubbish Tourette's while I was just sat in traffic.
But I kept pressing that button because that Arnage, to unlock the gear selector, it took me a moment to figure it out. You lift it up.
You have to lift it, yes.
But your instinctive thing, I thought, was to push the button on top.
Of course.
Because that looked like the thing that unlocked it, but that is the sport button instead, and then pushing it down to nothing. Yeah. So we should talk about this, because we went to Goodwood. We were going to record a podcast there, and then we ran out of time, and so we didn't, which is why we didn't talk about it last week. But we went to the members' meeting as guests of Bentley, and they brought a load of lovely things out of their heritage collection.
And we drove them in a convoy, and it was wonderful.
I drove a Brooklands to Goodwood from our hotel, about 10 miles away, and then I drove the Arnage back, and you did vice versa.
I did, and it was really enjoyable.
That Brooklands was lovely.
Oh my gosh, that Brooklands. If anyone, if you've forgotten, Bentley actually launched this car, I'm sure, in the UK recession, as was, about 2008.
Yeah.
And it was a very expensive two-door car. It was I don't know, 270 grand or something.
Something like
that. It was big money, but it's a big damn car. And I still think it looks incredibly handsome. It looks like it's been made by a stonemason. That's what I thought. And it's been chiselled out of the sort of like grave monument marble. It just looks so strong. But anyway, and it's still the build quality inside is to die for. But I know you were the first person to drive that car on the road because it's a delivery mileage car.
Yeah, they took the last Brooklands that they made, they just kept for themselves, but then they tucked it away. And there's something that they're very proud of this, and rightly so, that Bentley have decided they'll have this heritage fleet of cars. There's 45 cars, thereabouts, and they will all be ready to go at a moment's notice. So they're all drivable, they're all road registered, they'll all be kept in fully running, full Jay Leno style sort of, keep everything absolutely ready to go on the key.
Yeah.
And because in times gone by, apparently they had a heritage fleet that was just stashed in a warehouse somewhere, and it had all been allowed to get into a bit of a state. And did you hear the comms boss saying that he sort of slightly tricked the boss of the company into coming to this warehouse under false pretenses so he could see for himself what the heritage fleet looked like, as a way of getting him to sign off the budget to get it all back into roadworthy condition.
I didn't know that, but what a great idea. What to say, look at these sad creatures.
Well, he was like, I think the gist was, I could tell him, and he'll go, yes, fine, well, take it out of your budget. If I show him, he'll be so incensed that, everything's a bit dusty and crap, that he'll sign the cheque there and then, which is sort of what happened. Except for that people sign cheques anymore. And so they now have this fully running fleet. But the Brooklands, because they decided one of the things is everything should be available to be driven on the road, the Brooklands had never been registered. So it was registered on the Wednesday, and we got to drive it on the Saturday. And so I was the first person to drive it on the road.
So the first guy to drive it on the road was you with a hangover?
Yes, because we'd been in the hotel the night before getting a bit drinky.
We had.
But it was magnificent, that car. It's a good hangover car because it's so soothing and relaxing and gentle. But then it, as you discovered, then I was like, oh my God, what an enormous privilege and responsibility to be the first person to take this car on the road.
Yes.
And then on the way back to the hotel, I gave the keys to you, and at one point I looked in the mirror and you were doing a one-wheel peel out of a junction in it, making an enormous smoke screen across Sussex. You absolute flaunter.
Do you know what? It's such a swell of talk. It's just great. I may have had it in spokes mode, and I may have turned off the ESP just to see. But I have to say that the other thing I love, I do think a pillarless coupe. This one didn't have a sunroof, and you probably can't option it. But I say this because having got the Dodge out recently, the Charger, it's like there's something so special about a pillarless coupe. And if you can get a pillarless coupe with an opening sunroof, I think it's better than a convertible.
There's something special
in this country.
I didn't realise. I sort of hadn't been paying attention. I was just, you'll be disgusted, but I was just sitting there with the aircon on.
Oh, Richard.
On the way into Goodwood. And then I realised, well, actually, my passenger, I was in the car with somebody else, my passenger realised there's a button that does all four windows at once, and he put all four windows down. It was a lovely sunny morning, and we just sat there queuing into the circuit with our arms on the sills, and it was just like, it makes the world feel a better place when you've got all the windows down on it.
The arm on the top of the door with a pillarless coupe, it's something special.
I kind of wished I had a slender cigar on the go, because it would have suited the mood.
Oh, that would have been good, wouldn't it? Or you had, some people wear a watch, an expensive watch, but the bracelet is just one link too slack.
Yes.
And you think that if they point at something quickly, the watch is going to fly off. I'm always a bit nervous. It's a bit too slack for me.
A rattly older wealthy man is a common sight, I think. Just get it adjusted.
Yeah.
But I think it's the look, isn't it? I'd worry about scratching my door tops, though.
Me too.
Scratching my paint on the outside. But
especially that damn Brooklands, because it was flawless. Now,
but then the Arnage in the disgraced 70s DJ spec, a red Arnage red label, that was delightful as well. Do you know what was weird though? I was driving that Arnage and I suddenly thought it reminds me of something, and what it reminded me of, weirdly, was my Range Rover.
Okay.
Obviously it's lower,
yes,
but there's a definite overlap in vibe, in personality, because it sort of feels big and heavy, but very relaxing, very talky, big steering wheel.
Yes.
Quite sort of light-ish, not very quick steering, and it just pads down the road, feeling big and heavy.
They're probably worth about the same amount of money, aren't they?
Yeah, probably.
Because the Arnage,
I should have a little look at Arnages when
is that the sort of cheapest? Is that the cheapest Bentley at the moment, or the cheapest modern Bentley? Should we say?
Yeah. I mean, you probably get some ratty T2s, can't you, for similar money? But no, I did have a little look at Arnages. You've got to be careful because you want one with the proper 6.75 V8, don't you? None of that BMWs.
Yeah, well, I want the Arnage T really, because that's a smoke machine. Well,
there's one here for 15 grand, Johnny.
15. Well,
I think that's a guide price. It's going through an auction, but it's a grey one with the updated front end, which I always rather like.
Oh gosh, 15,000.
The estimate, 49,000 miles, and estimate is 15 to 20. So that is kind of.
That's a perfect school run car.
It's a lot of car, isn't it?
It is a lot of car.
They are great.
I think they've aged well, actually.
Yes, they have.
I think they've aged very. So I do like the Brooklands, and I did enjoy getting back into, because that's the first brand new Bentley I ever drove was the Arnage, the late 90s. Well, it would have been like 2001 Arnage. Was the first Bentley I ever had the joy of getting behind the wheel of when it was new. So it probably transported me back to a time when I had different facial hair and spiky hair and
Blink 182 hair.
Do you know, I've been getting trolled on Instagram for that. And it's like, do you know what?
Oh, what?
It was a moment in time. I'm fine with it. You guys need to
you're being trolled for your hair? I thought you meant you were being trolled for saying that Blink 182 are better than Green Day.
Oh, no, that's a fact. But
are you selling a Strada 130 TC as well? Because you're getting very punchy about things that don't require it.
Find another. Yeah, exactly.
Find another. Oh man,
yes.
Sorry, I'm on Car Classic, and I'm just look. There's a 2000 Bentley Arnage red label. It's almost identical to the one that we drove because it's red.
Yes,
cream leather interior with a red dash top. It's a 2000 car, but it's up for 31.5, which seems quite punchy. But it's only got 23,000 miles on it, and
that's not a lot.
I just scrolled down the advert. The condition of this car is not far off new. A credit to its last deceased owner.
Is that what it says?
Deceased spec Arnage.
Oh wow!
Fill your boots, my friend.
Gosh,
bloody hell! It's right. I mean, it does look new.
The way that was worded was delightful.
I know.
A credit to its previous deceased owner. Is that what it says?
I wonder if this dealership listens to this podcast, because there's no need for the word deceased in there. You could have said a credit to its last owner who looked after it so well. There's no need for deceased, and yet somehow that makes it
I love that.
weirdly more interesting. That's incredible.
I love that.
Wow.
I love that. Randall and Hopkirk and Arnage deceased. Yes.
Just Arnage by a deceased. I've just noticed something which I didn't spot in the one that we drove. Maybe I just wasn't paying attention. On the rear pillar, on the D pillar, on the inside. Did you notice that it got those?
I did, because I was so dirtily hungover at one point. I thought about pulling over into a lay-by and having a quick sort of, you know what I mean, sort of a quick sort of Japanese commuter train sleep in between stops. I thought I might do that. I remember, I've sat in the back of one of those, and I remember the head pillow is very, very quilty. Like an S-Class Mercedes headrest, which is still one of my favourite headrests of all time, which just makes me sound like a right old car bore. But
there's another
special.
Arnage here. I've got to stop browsing Arnages, but they're so nice.
You're
Arnage
wrong.
red label, 2001. It's a sort of dark silver or a grey.
Is the steering too heavy to palm in that, or can you properly Kim Palm Dashian?
I think I didn't really try it. It is a bit heavy because I can say my Range Rover is a Robert Palmer of a car par excellence, and I don't know that the Bentley is quite that, but it's certainly. I reckon you could give it a go.
What's that really expensive hotel in
Dubai?
Is it called the Palm? It is, isn't it? That sort of pretend.
There's a whole thing, isn't it? It's a man-made island, series of artificial islands. The Palm
of all sort of reclaimed dredged sand. So
just basically offshoring influencers a little bit.
Yeah,
so they can do their ghastly stuff.
Well, I expect there should be imagine palming around the Palm. There's loads of tight corners, and because there's a bit of sand blowing onto the roads, it would be a bit skitty and understeery at best.
You could have a real understeer moment but the rules are you have to correct it only using the Palm. So you're going to be quite busy. You're
going to want a quick steering box, my friend.
Dancing, yeah. One of the other things I liked about those Bentleys is that the mirror adjusters were separate, left and right have their own little joystick.
Yes, they did.
It's just delightful.
Do you know
they're lovely cars.
I think I was enjoying in the Arnage the sat nav, which in the late 90s, sat nav baked into a car was a fairly new deal. And yes. I think it was Alpine, and you pressed the button above your head, and it rose out of the dashboard on its because it was sort of colour-coded, leather-stitched back, so it was all concealed. And you remember back then when cars had sat-nav, and this happened for a good few years, companies made an effort to make them discreet. So if you didn't want them in your face, you could get rid. And now we've gone full sort of sat-nav codpiece, haven't we?
Yeah.
Where
also, it's one of those things that makes those Bentleys feel timeless is that you're not confronted by a screen that is really small by modern standards.
Yes.
Because it's the thing that really dates cars now, isn't it?
A little screen.
The tiny screens. But because the screen is not visible,
no,
you don't immediately go, oh, God, this is a 20-odd-year-old car. It's a bit more just sort of, it's a Bentley. It's got wood and lots of dials and things. They exist in their own space.
I thought also they have those lovely little.
You
can I reckon you could probably update it without anyone knowing because it's hidden a bit. Whereas big, overtly stuck-on infotainment screens are going to date hideously.
Yeah. Well, I like the fact as well that they had little leather pouch on the transmission tunnel for your Alpine sat-nav remote.
Oh yeah. That's right, I forgot about that. The sat-nav remote. That was really cool.
A little remote codpiece that just sat on the trans tunnel, so you could just pop it in there so it doesn't get lost or broken.
The Arnage is it's still the organ stops for the ventilation and the big chrome, very heavy metal eyeballs for the events. They're still very special. But look, we got to Goodwood. And we're in Goodwood, and there's obviously racing, historic racing and stuff, which I know we didn't see enough of. But I've written down in my notes.
Neither of us had been to the members' meeting before, had we? So
I've been.
I've
been twice. I've been twice.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, you're about the only person I talked to who'd been before. I spent a lot of time talking to people going, have you been to this before? No, I mean, it's good.
Oh, it's amazing.
So it's sort of like Revival, but without the dressing up. Did you see that guy as we were leaving who had dressed up as basically looked like a German submarine commander?
Oh gosh, he was quite sinister. Yeah,
yeah, dude, it's not that kind of thing. It's it's a nice little mashup of Revival and Festival of Speed.
He looked like if you'd thrown a bit of talc on his face, he looked like a baddie from Scooby-Doo. There was always a sort of strange, ghostly soldier. Have you noticed? There wasn't there?
Yeah.
And that's him. That was bloody him, walking through the pits. He was marching through the pits. It was quite sinister. But I've written down, because I know the thing about the members' meeting is it's not just pre-1965 or whatever the Revival is. So you've got the 70s Capris, Triumph Dolomites, Rover SD1s, 70s Camaros. I really like that. We've talked about this before. I really like that era, the mid to late 70s kind of touring car stuff. It's cool and quick. Some real quick cars. But it got me thinking, while we were watching some of that and enjoying the fact that the sun had come out, I thought, I know what Goodwood road racing is missing. There's two separate races that are missing here that we could pitch to them. One of them is the Goodwood cardboard over the radiator race. You know, we're talking winter driving. In the old days, people used to put a piece of cardboard either partially or completely over the front of the radiator.
Yes.
So I think there should be a race, and it's a very tactical race, and you have to decide how much cardboard to put in on the start line because there has to be a certain amount that's mandatory. And
do you not feel that the cardboard would quickly become superfluous under race conditions when the engine would be running very hot?
Of course. But of
this
course,
is part of the skill of judging.
It's the skill. You have to either divert some of the aero using rudimentary artifacts, or you have to drive in a different. You have to drive by the temp gauge. So you put in a really hot lap, like literally a hot lap, and then you have to do a cooler lap because otherwise your engine's going to cook and you won't finish. So he goes from being on pole to being back of the grid, then comes back up, and so that the Goodwood cardboard over the rad race, I think, is a good one. Yeah. The other one is, and we did touch on it, I think, when we were drinking too much coffee with a hangover, was you have to compete in a totally standard, non-sporty classic car. The only thing that you're allowed to go to town on, and there's a £30,000 limit, is suspension. So you could have, we said, like a base model Triumph Dolomite 1.5 automatic. So a dreadfully slow and probably wobbly car. And you're not allowed to do... And you've got... If you want, you can get a hot touring car driver to drive with you for this. But the only thing you're allowed to do is to tap Olin's or someone on the shoulder and go, right, this needs to have the best suspension in the world. Because I need to pretty much drive this at VMAX everywhere. I can't afford to brake heavily because it won't. It doesn't go very fast. So once I'm up to the speed, I need to stay there. Let's see what we can do. I think it would be a great race. Could be a good leveler. Sweet race.
I'd certainly enjoy rocking up in my Dolomite automatic with fully rose-jointed suspension for some reason or other. But it's still got velour seats.
Oh, it's got everything else is stock. I want to know what the listeners think. What would you go for? What would you enter in your totally standard bar suspension event?
Totally standard brackets bar suspension race challenge.
That's
what are you calling this event?
Oh, it would be the Rose Joint Cup, or it would be the Olin's Invitational.
Yes, the Coney Challenge.
Other dampers are available, of course.
Yes, of course. Good. Okay. Well, what about as an added twist? And I know this because I've just been recently brazing tyres. That it's sponsored by one of those really odd tyre manufacturers you've never heard of, whose tyres are like 34 quid when Goodyears are 120. It's like a sort of Road Kings challenge. So you've gone to town on the rose jointing and the very expensive remote reservoir dampers, but then you're forced to use these mysterious off-brand tyres that you think might be made in Madagascar, but you're not sure.
My brother's got some of those on his Golf. I'm trying I was chuckling at them the other morning because he's just bought a set, and he went, "What are you taking the mick out of them?" And he said the word. It sounded like Goran Ivanisevic, but I know a tennis player is not the guy that makes tyres.
Well, he might be. He goes, because he has no expertise in that area. That's why they cost £24.
But then maybe they are the Goran Ivanisevic's 195 55 16s.
Why is he? I think this is the very definition of a false economy, because I guarantee they'll wear out in like 4,000 miles, and in that 4,000 miles, every time it rains, you'll slide off the road and break your car. So,
I don't. Yeah, Or they're really hard. They do 160,000 miles, but they have no stopping power, no turning power.
No.
There's no feel whatsoever because they're pretty much made of mahogany.
Well, either way, that concludes this week's bad-mouthing Johnny's brother, the new regular slot on Smith and Smith.
But it's okay because he doesn't listen.
Because he makes a point of not listening. He aggressively doesn't listen to this podcast. So.
Although his son does. He was the one. He very much enjoyed having red meat ghosting mentioned on one of the previous casts.
Cool. Okay.
One thing I must also mention: I heard Nicolas Cage on a radio show being called up out of the blue on Radio 1 by the breakfast show DJ, my friend Greg James. He had a guest on who just finished a film with Nicolas Cage, a vampire film that I can't remember the name of, and they play this game called Sit Down Stand Up, which you might have heard of, I don't know. But basically you have to phone a famous friend out of the blue, and then you have to guess whether they're standing up when they answer the phone or whether they're sitting down. It really is that technical. And this guy phoned Nicolas Cage, I think. So Greg James, the DJ, had to guess whether he was sat down or whatever, and the other guy did. And Nicolas Cage answered the phone in America would have been about 2 a.m. in America. And they said, "Oh, hi, Nicholas. We're just doing this junket promotional thing for the film. Can I ask if you sat down or stood up?" He went, "I'm lying down." And he went, "Oh," he goes, "I'm lying down. I'm lying down on the lounge floor." And he in that sort of drawl, he goes, "I'm just surfing the internet for Studebakers at the moment. I'm going to buy a Studebaker." That's why he just sort of casually. So he was I bet he was on Car and Classic. I bet the Cage was surfing for Studebakers. How cool's that, right? Unusual cars as well.
Surfing for Studebakers sounds like an album, possibly by Green Day, in fact.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, it could be, couldn't it? Yeah.
Something about there. Anyway, well, look, if you wanted to drop us a line about what car you would enter in Johnny's rose-jointed cup.
Olin's Invitational.
Sponsored by Ditch Finders Limited.
Yeah.
Then it's hello@smithandsniff.com. And we should probably then start to bring this gently into the shore. But before we go, I have 3 things to tell you.
Oh, gosh.
One, Johnny has a solo YouTube channel. It's called The Irate at Straits Show, in which he becomes irrationally furious about narrow but navigable waterways between 2 large bodies of water. This week, he's in Gibraltar, the gateway between the Med and the Atlantic, shouting, "What the fuck, you narrow bastard, I can practically see the other side." If that's not to your taste, because it's nonsense, there's always the Late Break Show. Lots of excellent videos about cars. We love them. Go and check out the amazing Lancia Delta Integrale
Resto mod
from the Netherlands.
Or by the time you listen to this, there will be a lovely car cave where I get the chance for the first time to drive a BMW Z8.
Ooh,
which I've still never. I've driven off for the first time, and we did a little drive out of it. And the guy's car collection is really fascinating. He's got a properly eclectic taste, which I got a lot of time for.
Oh, interesting.
And all that.
Second thing I've got to tell you is we have merch. Go to smithandsniff.com/merch, and we've got T-shirts, mugs, stickers.
We've had famous people ordering stickers and everything. I can't tell you who they are, but we've had famous people ordering our stickers.
Have we?
Yeah, we have. Not Nicolas Cage.
Oh.
But,
no, you'll have to tell me this one off air. Okay, so the third thing I'll tell you is that titanium was discovered in Cornwall.
Was it?
Yeah, it was discovered
by Poldark?
Yes, by Poldark. And it was named after the Greek Titans. But it was discovered in Cornwall in 1791.
Bloody hell, I bet they couldn't cut it.
95% of all titanium is refined into titanium dioxide, which is a white pigment that's used in pretty much everything white. So paint, sunscreen, toothpaste. That's where a lot of titanium goes. We think it's just used to make, SR71s and Apple Ultra watches, but no, it's actually...
Well, or, I don't know,
item.
The sort of exhausts for sports bikes, which... go past your house on a Sunday morning at 10 a.m. But
what's your most annoying exhaust? I'll take it. Yeah, well, there we go. Anyway, that's probably that for this. But thank you ever so much for listening, and we'll do it all again next week. Until then, goodbye.
As he says, thank you. Bye.
You know just what to do. Like and subscribe and review. You know just what to do. Like and subscribe and review. You know just what to do.
podcast, Two Friends Talk About Cars. Try finding another one.
That's what we should say. The UK's best automotive podcast. Don't believe me? Find another.
Find another. Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Okay, there's the
Oh, shit, yeah.
And also car.
Bollocks. Oh, Mike Brewer's doing one as well. Oh, shite.